I came home from 6 months in Portland to find my grandmother's photography van parked in a stranger's driveway with my brother-in-law's name still on the sale receipt. When my sister told me, "It's just a van, you can shoot on your phone," I smiled. "What's funny?" she snapped. I said, "The van you sold was actually," and that's when everything started unraveling. My name is Zoe. I'm 32, and for most of my adult life, the most valuable thing I owned wasn't my camera gear or my client list or the tiny apartment I'd been renting in Austin. It was a 1994 Ford Econoline that my grandmother had spent 3 years converting into a mobile photography studio before her hands got too shaky to hold a camera. She called it the Silver Room. I always thought that was a little dramatic until I understood what she meant. Step inside with the rear doors shut and the world went quiet in a specific way. Like the van absorbed noise rather than blocked it. She'd lined the walls with gray acoustic panels she'd ordered from a theater supply company in Tennessee. She'd built shelves from reclaimed oak. She'd installed a secondary electrical system that ran off a deep cycle battery so she could power strobes and a monitor without hunting for outlets. The whole thing was a self-contained world, a room that moved. She left it to me when she died 3 winters ago. Not because I was the oldest grandchild, and not because anyone else wanted it. She left it to me because I was the one who used to sit in the back with her when I was 9 years old, while she edited prints on a laptop balanced on a camping cooler. She was teaching me something without naming it. She was teaching me that the work mattered more than the applause. I am not the family success story. That title has belonged to my brother-in-law since he married my sister 6 years ago and started a landscaping company that my parents talk about like it's a Fortune 500 firm. His name is Garrett. He's the kind of man who uses the word synergy without irony and genuinely believes that confidence is a substitute for competence. My parents have loved him from the first handshake. My sister Renee orbits him with a devotion that I used to mistake for love and later understood was more like anxiety. I am the one who takes pictures for a living. My parents have said this the way people say someone collects stamps. Interesting hobby, unclear income, nothing you'd bring up at a dinner party unless you ran out of other things to say. My commercial clients are good. My editorial work has been in 3 regional magazines. None of that has ever translated into the kind of respect that Garrett gets for owning a truck fleet and knowing how to shake hands. The arrangement in our family has always been simple. I was the capable one. Renee was the one who needed protection. I helped with their taxes 2 years running. I shot Garrett's company headshots for free. I designed their Christmas cards for free. I designed their Christmas cards. I was useful in the way that a Swiss Army knife is useful. Always available, never quite valued. Portland broke the pattern, at least temporarily. A cinematographer I'd met at a workshop invited me to assist on a documentary project up there. 6 months, modest pay, extraordinary access. They were filming the remnants of old-growth logging communities, people who had watched an entire economy dissolve around them over 30 years, the kind of project that doesn't pay your rent but fills something that rent can't fill. I drove to Portland in February with my camera bags in the back seat and left the Silver Room locked in the storage lot behind my apartment building. I paid the lot fee through August. I gave my landlord notice. I told my family where I was going and when I planned to be back, and my mother said, "Well, just be careful," which is what she says when she doesn't know what else to say but feels obligated to say something. I didn't call home much, not out of resentment, out of focus. The documentary work pulled me in. 6 months of sleeping in a rented room in a farmhouse east of the city, eating bad coffee and good homemade bread, listening to men in their 70s describe what it felt like to watch a way of life die slowly, like a tide going out and not coming back. I shot 10,000 frames. I cried twice. I didn't think about Garrett once. I drove back to Austin in August, and the storage lot was where I'd left it, and the Silver Room was not. I noticed the absence before I noticed anything else. The lot held maybe 40 vehicles, and I knew exactly where I parked. Row C, third space from the fence, between a green RV that never moved and a trailer with a padlock on the hitch. The space was empty. Not empty like a vehicle that had been moved to another row. Empty like a space that had been empty for a while. The lot manager found the paperwork after about 4 minutes of searching through a filing system that appeared to be organized by chaos. A release form, signed. A bill of sale, 2 months old. He read me the name on the release authorization. Garrett. My name was not on any of it. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time. I called my sister. She didn't answer. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring and said, "Oh, you're back," like I'd just returned from a long walk. "Where is the van?" I said. A pause, not the pause of someone caught off guard, the pause of someone choosing which version of a prepared answer to use. "Renee will explain everything," she said. "It's a family decision." "That van is mine," I said. "Grandma left it to me." "Grandma left a lot of things," she said, "which meant nothing and was designed to mean nothing." I drove to my sister's house. Garrett's truck was in the driveway, engine still warm. Inside, Renee met me at the door with the expression she wears when she's rehearsed a conversation and is hoping it goes according to the script. "You need to hear us out," she said. That phrase, "hear us out," as if there were two sides to my van being sold without my knowledge or permission. Garrett was in the kitchen. He had the specific posture of a man who has done something and is managing his guilt by reframing it as a favor. "We were in a tough spot," he said. "Cash flow issue, I had a contract fall through and I needed to bridge the gap. The van was just sitting there." "It was sitting in a locked storage lot that I paid for," I said. "You were gone 6 months," Renee said. "We didn't know if you were coming back." I looked at her. I had texted her an estimated return date in July. She had responded with a thumbs up emoji. "How did you get the release form signed?" I asked. Garrett looked at the counter. Renee looked at the table. "Garrett handles paperwork sometimes," she said. "For the business, he has a stamp." "He stamped my signature," I said. "He signed on your behalf," she corrected, "as a family member." She said it the way you say something when you know it isn't true, but you've repeated it enough times that it started to feel true, the way lies calcify. "You can shoot on your phone," Garrett said. "That camera you have is better than anything in that van anyway." That sentence landed somewhere specific inside me. Not because it was cruel, though it was, because it was exactly the kind of thing someone says when they've never once thought about what you actually do or why you do it or what it costs to do it well. My grandmother built that van over 3 years. She sourced the acoustic panels from a supplier in Chattanooga because she'd read about them in a technical journal. She wired the secondary electrical system herself using a guide she'd ordered from an RV forum and a box of connectors she'd bought at an auto parts store. She'd mounted a softbox rail along the ceiling so you could adjust lighting without moving stands. She knew things, and she'd put those things into that vehicle, and what she'd actually given me was not a van, but a methodology, a way of working, compressed into steel and acoustic foam and reclaimed oak shelving. "You can shoot on your phone." "I know someone who can help," I said quietly. "Help with what?" Renee said. "There's nothing to help with. The van is sold." I didn't argue. I walked out. The person I called was a woman named Vivienne, not a friend exactly, more like someone I'd photographed 2 years ago for a magazine profile and who had, in the process of being photographed, mentioned that she was an attorney who specialized in property and estate disputes and that she found the work satisfying in the way that people find surgery satisfying, precise, high stakes, finite. She'd given me her card. I kept it. She picked up on the third ring. I told her what happened in about 90 seconds. She didn't say anything sympathetic. She asked me to send the probate documents from my grandmother's estate, the original vehicle title, and anything showing the storage lot authorization. "Don't contact him again tonight," she said, "and don't call the person who bought the van." I asked her why. "Because I want to see something first," she said, and hung up. Vivienne called me the next morning from what sounded like a very quiet office. She had a quality I'd noticed when I photographed her, which was that she delivered information in a tone that made it sound like facts were furniture, solid, unmovable, simply placed. "There's a problem with the sale," she said. My stomach dropped in a specific direction, the direction of bad news with an asterisk. "What kind of problem?" "A useful one," she said. "Your grandmother didn't just leave you the van, She registered the installed equipment separately: the camera rail, the battery system, the acoustic treatment, the built-in shelving. It's all listed as commercial photography equipment under a separate personal property schedule in the estate. It was registered with the county assessor 2 years before she died. I sat very still. The van itself is one asset, Vivienne said. The equipment installed in the van is a different asset. Your brother-in-law sold a vehicle he didn't own and therefore couldn't sell what was inside it, not legally. The buyer got a van with no interior, I said slowly. The buyer got a van, Vivienne said. The interior belongs to you, and the original sale is defective because it was executed with a forged authorization, which is its own separate problem. She paused to let that land. There's more, she said. When Garrett filed the release with the storage lot, he listed himself as your authorized agent. He's not. And the signature on the form doesn't match the signature on file with the storage company from when you opened the account. They have your original on a digital form. The discrepancy is significant. I asked her what that meant. It means this wasn't a family misunderstanding, she said. It means someone signed your name on a legal document without your authorization to transfer property they didn't own. That's fraud. And the forgery element is criminal, not a civil. That word criminal was the first thing in 2 days that made me feel like solid ground was still somewhere below me. Vivienne filed an emergency motion to freeze the title transfer and sent notice to the buyer that the equipment inside the van, which the buyer had likely assumed came with the vehicle, was not part of the transaction. The buyer, to his credit, turned out to be a reasonable person. He called Vivienne's office within 4 hours. He had no interest in being part of whatever this was. He'd bought what he thought was a fully equipped mobile studio. He hadn't known any of it was disputed. While Vivienne worked, my phone filled up with messages. My mother first. Gentle, concerned-sounding, strategically vague. I think you should talk to Renee before this gets out of hand. Out of hand meaning before I involved a lawyer. Out of hand meaning before there were consequences. Garrett, next. Zoe, I need you to understand that I was trying to keep the business afloat for your sister, for your family. I didn't have options. I didn't respond. Then Renee, which was harder, because my sister and I had grown up sharing a bedroom and a bathroom and a set of hand-me-down bicycles and a general understanding that we were on the same team even when we weren't. Her message was long. It talked about how scared she'd been when the cash flow problem hit, how Garrett had been working 20-hour days, how they'd almost lost the truck fleet, how they'd looked at everything available and the van was just sitting there and I was gone and she'd thought I wouldn't find out. That was the part she didn't write, but I could read between every other sentence. She'd thought I wouldn't find out. 2 days later, my parents showed up at the motel I was staying in, since my apartment was no longer mine. My mother knocked with the specific knock of someone who believes they're the reasonable one in a situation they helped create. My father stood behind her with the expression of a man who has been handed a position he didn't choose. You're destroying your sister's marriage, my mother said before she was fully through the door. I'm not the one who forged documents, I said. Nobody forged anything, my father said, but he said it to the carpet. My mother sat down without being asked. She had the posture of someone delivering unfortunate news to a subordinate. Garrett made a mistake, she said. He was panicking, he acted without thinking. But the solution here is not lawyers. The solution is family. Family, I said. This is going to follow him, she said. A fraud allegation. Do you understand what that does to a small business owner, to your sister's livelihood? I looked at her carefully. He signed my name on a document, I said. He sold something that belonged to me, and before all of that, not one person in this family called me to ask if there was another way. You were unavailable, she said. I was in Portland, I said. I had a phone. She pivoted without acknowledging the point. You can shoot on your phone, she said. And I recognized the phrase from Garrett's mouth and understood that they'd discussed this, that this was the line they'd agreed on, that my work had been assessed and deemed portable, and therefore the loss of the equipment that made it professional was a minor inconvenience, an overreaction, a drama. I felt something shift in me then, not anger exactly, Clarity arriving late. They had done the math on my life and concluded that I was expendable, that my equipment was expendable, that my grandmother's methodology, compressed into oak and acoustic foam, was a line item that could be liquidated when something more important needed funding. And the most important thing in their accounting was never going to be me. Vivienne had asked me to meet at the storage lot the following morning with my parents present. Not for the conversation, she said, for the documentation, for the witness. I got there first. The lot was grey and quiet. The silver room was back, or at least the shell of it was. The buyer had agreed to return the vehicle pending resolution, which meant the van sat in row C again, with its rear doors open and the interior gutted, bare metal walls, the acoustic panels stacked in the corner of the lot in a pile, the oak shelving removed and leaning against the fence like someone had taken a room apart and left the pieces. My parents arrived. Garrett and Renee came separately. Garrett looked like a man who had rehearsed a speech and was hoping he'd get to deliver it. Renee wouldn't look at the van. Vivienne arrived last, carrying a single folder. My mother moved toward me immediately. "Let's resolve this like a family," she said, "before this becomes something nobody can walk back from." Garrett stepped forward. "I'll get you new equipment," he said. "Better than what was in there. I'll buy it myself. Just drop the fraud claim. My investors are asking questions. This is affecting my ability to operate." I looked at him. "You sold my grandmother's work," I said. "You can't replace that with a receipt." He scowled. His voice hardened. "You're being sentimental. This is business." "It's my business," I said, literally. Renee made a sound somewhere between a sob and a word that didn't finish. Garrett touched her arm and she went quiet, the way she goes quiet around him. That specific going quiet that I'd watched for 6 years and never named until now. My mother tried one more time. "You can shoot on your phone," she said, and this time it came out slower, like she knew the phrase wasn't working but couldn't think of another one. I smiled. "What's funny?" Garrett snapped. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I nodded at Vivienne. She opened the folder and held out a single page to him. "The equipment inside this vehicle," she said, without raising her voice, "is registered as a separate personal property asset in the estate of Eleanor Marsh Coleswell, transferred to Zoe at time of probate. It's listed here by category and estimated value. It was not yours to sell. It was not included in any valid transaction because no valid transaction was executed. The authorization was forged, which makes the whole thing defective. And the separate personal property claim means, even if the sale had been valid, you'd still have conveyed the wrong thing." A moment of complete silence. Then Garrett's face changed, not all at once, in stages, like a building losing power floor by floor. "Interior property," he said. "That's not a real thing." "It's in the county assessor's records," Vivienne said. "From 2021. Your mother-in-law's mother filed it." He turned to my mother. "Did you know about this?" She was very still. He turned back to me. "Just tell them it's fine," he said. "Tell them you authorize it retroactively. We'll work something out. I'll get you a check." "For what?" I asked. "For the trouble," he said. "You forged my signature," I said, "and then you sold my grandmother's equipment and told me I could shoot on my phone. You're going to destroy everything," he said. His voice cracked in a way I'd never heard from him. "The investors are already skittish. If this goes further, the whole round collapses. Do you understand that? I'm trying to build something for this family, for Renee. You're going to burn it down over a van?" He stepped closer. His voice dropped into something that was trying to be calm and wasn't. "I need you to fix this," he said. "Your family. You help people in this family." My sister made another sound behind him. I looked at her over his shoulder. "Renee," I said, "did you know he was going to do this?" She looked at the asphalt. "I didn't know until he'd already done it," she said quietly. "And then I didn't know how to tell you." There it was. My mother put her hand on my arm. "Let's not do this here," she said. "Let's go somewhere private." "Everything that needs to happen from here goes through my office," Vivienne said. Any contact with Zoe outside of that becomes part of the harassment documentation. The forgery referral to the DA's office goes out at the end of the week, regardless. That word, DA, landed in the silence like a stone into water. Garrett made a sound I had no category for. Renee grabbed his arm. My father looked at the fence. My mother's expression went through 3 different phases and settled on something that looked almost like recognition, as if some part of her had always known that a day like this was a structural inevitability in the building they'd been constructing for decades. And she was only now seeing the blueprint clearly. I drove to Vivian's office and sat in a chair across from her desk while she went through next steps with me. The DA referral, the civil recovery for the equipment value, which the assessor's record placed at just over $40,000. The buyer's cooperation, which simplified the chain of title significantly. What happens to Garrett? I asked. Depends on what the DA does, she said. Forgery on a property transfer document is a felony in Texas. First offense might end in a plea. Might not. Business license complications are more likely than prison. And Renee? She says she didn't know beforehand. That may be true. That may not. Either way, that's between them. I nodded. Your grandmother was very organized, Vivian said, which was the most lawyer thing anyone had ever said to me, and also the truest. A few weeks after the hearing, I stood in the lot with the rear doors of the van open and a socket wrench in my hand. The acoustic panels went back in first. They were heavier than I remembered, and I had to tilt them at an angle to get them through the doors. The oak shelving required 2 trips and a folding table to act as a staging platform. The camera rail went up last. I drove the mounting screws in with a drill that had been in the pile with the rest of it. And when the final screw seated, I sat back on my heels and looked at the ceiling of the silver room and thought about my grandmother organizing connectors into labeled bins while she watched a technical forum on her laptop. She'd known, not that any of this would happen, but that ownership is not a feeling. It's a document. It's a registration number. It's a line in a county assessor's record from 2021 that says this equipment belongs to a specific person and cannot be conveyed without her. She'd build that protection in quietly, the same way she'd build the room itself, methodically, without announcement, because she understood that the things you love most require the most specific care. Garrett's investors did pull back. The landscaping company survived but contracted, lost 2 of the truck contracts, entered a rough year. My parents spent 2 months speaking to me through my sister and then started calling directly when that stopped working. My sister and I don't talk often. When we do, it's careful, like 2 people crossing a floor with a weak spot. We know where to step. We know where to step. We know what to avoid. Maybe that changes. Maybe it doesn't. The van went back to being the silver room. I drove it to a headshot workshop I was running in San Marcos and parked it in the venue lot and watched 3 photographers spend 20 minutes staring at the interior ceiling rail and asking questions. And I thought about my grandmother sitting on the edge of her bed with a technical journal and a yellow legal pad, designing something she knew she'd leave behind. The first time I pulled the rear doors shut after everything was reassembled and stood in that specific quiet again, I felt something I hadn't expected, not triumph, not even relief exactly, something closer to the feeling of finding a word for something you've known for a long time without being able to name it. The moment your family decides you're a resource, they've already answered the question of what you are to them. The moment you stop accepting that answer, they call it betrayal. But the one who decided first wasn't you. I keep thinking about my grandmother sitting at her kitchen table with a technical journal and a yellow legal pad, working out how to register the interior equipment separately from the vehicle itself. She didn't tell anyone she was doing it. She just did it, quietly and completely, because she understood something I had to learn the hard way. The things you love most require the most deliberate protection. She was right about that. And the story of what happened to the silver room is, in a lot of ways, the story of what happens when people around you confuse your willingness to help with an absence of limits. I helped Garrett with his company headshots. I helped Renee with their taxes. I was always there when something needed doing, and I never asked for much in return, and I think somewhere along the way that became their evidence that I didn't need anything. That I was fine. that I could absorb whatever came at me and adjust without friction. When they looked at the van sitting in that storage lot while I was in Portland, they didn't see my grandmother's 3 years of work. They didn't see $40,000 worth of registered equipment or a methodology compressed into oak and acoustic foam. They saw a resource that nobody was actively defending, and they made a calculation. The calculation was wrong, and what made it wrong wasn't just the law, though the law was clear. What made it wrong was that they had forgotten, or maybe never known, that capability is not the same as availability. Being able to handle something does not mean you've consented to it. What I had to find in myself, and I don't think I would have found it without 6 months in Portland, without the distance, without the work, was the clarity to act on what I knew was right, even when acting on it cost me something. It cost me comfortable dinners and easy phone calls and the fiction that my family saw me the way I saw myself. That's not a small thing to lose. I won't pretend it was. But there's a kind of intelligence that only becomes available when you stop accepting other people's definitions of your situation. Vivian saw it immediately. She looked at the documents and she looked at what my grandmother had built and she understood the structure of it without anyone explaining it to her. She didn't ask me if I was sure I wanted to pursue it. She just started working. That's what it looks like when someone respects the reality of what happened to you. They don't soften it, they address it. I had to do the same thing for myself. Not dramatically, not with speeches, just the steady daily decision to not unsee what I had seen, to not unfeel what I had felt, to not call a forged signature a misunderstanding because calling it what it was made. The holiday's complicated. The van is whole again. The camera rail is back on the ceiling. The oak shelves hold the same equipment they've always held, and the acoustic panels do what they were built to do, which is absorb the noise of the outside world and leave just the whir. My grandmother left me more than a vehicle. She left me an example of what it looks like to build something carefully, to protect it deliberately, and to trust that the right structure, put in place quietly and without announcement, will hold when it needs to. It held. And so eventually did I.